The stars looked different when you were about to conquer them. Commander Zexthul stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue-white sun of another system grow larger on the main screen. Behind him, 66 other ships moved in perfect formation. Each vessel was a work of art, built from living crystal that could bend and flow like water but remained harder than any metal. The Kethmoran Empire had been expanding for 300 years. World after world fell before their fleets. Some planets tried to fight. Most simply gave up when they saw the crystal ships appear in their skies. Zexthul preferred it when they surrendered quickly. War was messy. Conquest was clean. "Commander," his aide spoke in their musical language. "We are receiving surrender signals from the third planet." Zexthul was not surprised. His scouts had told him about this world called Haven Prime. The beings there were human colonists, part of a young species that had only started traveling between stars 50 years ago. They had small ships and simple weapons. They would know. They could not win. "Send the usual response," Zexthul ordered. "Tell them they will be spared if they follow our laws. Their technology will serve the Empire. Their people will work for us." It was always the same. Every world had the same choice: serve or die. Most chose to serve. The smart ones did anyway. Far across the system, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair on the bridge of the USS Valiant. His ship was much smaller than the alien vessels approaching Haven Prime. Where their ships were smooth and curved, his was angular and practical. Where theirs gleamed like jewels, his was painted gray and black for space combat. Jake was 35 years old and had been in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years. He had fought space pirates and defended mining stations, but he had never faced anything like this. The reports from other worlds were all the same. The Kethmoran showed up. They demanded surrender. If the world said no, the aliens destroyed everything. "Captain," Lieutenant Amy Carson called from her station. "Earth. Command is sending new orders." Jake read the message on his personal screen. The words were simple but heavy. Haven Prime was evacuating as many people as possible. But the transport ships needed time. Someone had to slow down the alien fleet. "How long do the transports need?" Jake asked. 6 hours to get everyone off the planet," Amy replied. She was 28 and the best tactical officer Jake had ever worked with. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes were focused on her displays. Jake looked around his bridge. There were only 12 people here, but they were his people. He had trained with them for 3 years. They trusted him, and he trusted them. "Ben," he called to Lieutenant Ben Harper at the communications station. Ben was a tall, thin man with dark skin and quick fingers. "Send a message to the alien fleet. Tell them this system is under Earth protection." Ben's hands moved over his controls. "Message sent, Captain." "Amy, what do we know about their weapons?" Amy pulled up her data. "Reports from other battles show they use energy beams that can cut through most ship armor. Their shields can stop almost any weapon that has been used against them. They usually win fights in less than 10 minutes. Jake nodded. It was not good news, but it was what he expected. "What about our weapons?" "We have railguns and missile systems. Standard Earth tech. Nothing special." In the engine room, Chief, Engineer Lisa Grant was checking her systems. Lisa was a small woman with blonde hair and sharp blue eyes. She knew every part of the ship better than anyone. The Valiant was not the newest ship in the fleet, but it was solid and reliable. "How are we looking, Lisa?" Jake asked over the comm. "Everything is running smooth, Captain. The new armor plating is installed and ready. Shields are at full power." The new armor was something Earth engineers had been working on for 2 years. It was designed to absorb energy and spread it across the hull instead of letting it burn through in one spot. Nobody knew if it would work against alien weapons. Back on the Kethmoran flagship, Zexthul received the human message. He had his computer translate it several times to make sure he understood. The humans were claiming this system belonged to them. They were telling his fleet to leave. "How many human ships are in the system?" he asked his tactical officer. "One, Commander, a single vessel of unknown class." Zexthul felt something he had not experienced in decades. Confusion. One ship against his entire fleet. It made no sense. Even the bravest species he had conquered sent at least a dozen ships to face him. What do we know about human military? Capability? Very little, Commander. They are a young species. Their technology appears to be basic. They use chemical rockets and metal projectiles. Zexthul almost laughed. Chemical rockets? His people had stopped using such primitive technology. Thousands of years ago, what could one human ship possibly do against his fleet? Open a channel to the human vessel, he ordered. On the Valiant, Ben received the incoming message. Captain, the aliens are trying to talk to us. Put them on screen. The main display changed to show a tall, thin alien with silver skin and large black eyes. When it spoke, the computer translated its words into English. I am Commander Zexthul of the Catamaran Empire. You will move your ship aside and allow us to proceed to the planet. If you comply, your vessel will be spared. Jake stood up from his chair. He was not a tall man, but he had broad shoulders and a steady voice. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. You are not welcome in this system. Turn your ships around and leave. Zexthul's expression did not change, but Jake could tell the alien was surprised. Captain Morrison, you have one ship. I have 67. Your resistance is pointless. Maybe, Jake said, but we're not moving. The channel closed. Zexthul stared at the screen for a long moment. In 300 years of conquest, no single ship had ever challenged his fleet. The humans were either very brave or very stupid. He would find out which in a few minutes. All ships, he broadcast to his fleet. Prepare for combat operations. Target the human vessel. Use minimum power. We want to capture it intact. On the Valiant, Amy watched her sensors as the alien ships began to move into attack formation. Captain, they're spreading out. It looks like they want to surround us. Jake sat back down in his chair. All hands, this is the captain. Battle stations. We knew this was coming. Let's show these aliens what humans can do. Red lights flashed throughout the ship as the crew prepared for combat. Jake looked at the alien fleet on his screen. 67 ships against 1. The odds were impossible, but Jake Morrison had been a soldier long enough to know that impossible odds just meant you had to be smarter and tougher than the enemy. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was being too stubborn to know when they were beaten. The Catamaran fleet moved like a school of fish, each ship knowing exactly where to go without being told. Commander Zexthul watched his tactical display as his vessels formed a perfect sphere around the lone human ship. It was a formation his people had used for centuries. No ship had ever escaped from it. The human vessel sat in the center of the sphere, not moving, not trying to run. Zexthul found this strange. Most species either fled immediately or tried to negotiate when they saw his ship surround them. The humans were doing neither. Commander, his aide reported, all ships are in position. The human vessel is completely surrounded. Good. Begin the standard suppression pattern. Low power only. I want that ship intact so we can study their technology. On the bridge of the USS Valiant, Captain Jake Morrison watched the alien ships take their positions. Each one was larger than his ship, and their crystal hulls reflected the light from the local star in brilliant colors. They were beautiful in a deadly way. Amy, he said to his tactical officer, what's your read on their formation? Lieutenant, Amy Carson studied her screens. It's designed to hit us from every angle at once. They're keeping their distance so we can't ram any of them. Classic overwhelming force tactics. How long until the transports are clear of the planet? Amy checked. Another display. 5 hours and 37 minutes, Captain. Jake nodded. They needed to hold out for almost 6 more hours. Against a fleet that had never lost a battle. Ben? Anything from Earth Command? Lieutenant Ben Harper shook his head. No, sir. We're on our own out here. In the engine room, Chief. Engineer Lisa Grant was making final adjustments to the ship's power systems. The new armor plating was connected to the main reactor through a series of energy conduits. In theory, any energy that hit the armor would be absorbed and distributed throughout the ship's structure. In practice, nobody knew if it would work. Lisa, Jake called over the comm. How's our power situation? All systems green, Captain. The reactor is running at 90%. I'm keeping 10% in reserve for emergencies. Good thinking. The first alien shots came without warning. Beams of bright blue energy struck the Valiant from 12 different directions at once. The ship shook, and several console lights flickered. Jake gripped his chair as sparks flew from an overloaded circuit near the navigation station. "Damage report," he called out. Amy checked her readings. Shields down to 85%. Hull integrity holding. Wait, she looked more closely at her displays. "Captain, this is weird. The energy from their weapons is actually charging our armor plating." "Say again?" "The alien weapons are feeding power into our defensive systems. Whatever frequency they're using, our armor is absorbing it and converting it to usable energy." Jake felt a small smile creep across his face. "Lisa, are you seeing this?" In the engine room, Lisa was staring at her displays in amazement. "Captain, our power levels are actually going up. The alien weapons are giving us more energy than they're taking away." On the Kethmaran flagship, Zexthul was looking at his own readings with confusion. His weapons officer reported that their energy beams were striking the human ship, but the vessel's power signature was increasing instead of decreasing. "That is impossible," Zexthul said. "Check your instruments." All instruments are functioning correctly, Commander. The human ship is somehow absorbing our weapons fire. Zexthul had conquered 47 different species. He had seen all kinds of defensive technology, energy shields, ablative armor, reflection systems. But he had never seen anything that could actually gain power from being shot. "Increase power. To weapons," he ordered. "Full suppression protocols." The second wave of attacks was much stronger. The blue energy beams were now joined by pulses of green and white light. The Valiant shook harder this time, and Jake could hear the metal hull creaking under the stress. "Shields down to 70%, Amy reported. But our armor is still absorbing energy. Total ship power is now at 105%. Jake made a decision that would have seemed crazy to any military academy instructor. Instead of trying to defend against the alien weapons, he was going to use them. "Amy, target the closest enemy ship. Ben, I want you to record everything that happens. Next, Earth Command needs to see this." "Target locked, Captain," Amy said. "Fire." The Valiant's railguns spoke for the first time in the battle. These weapons were simple in concept but devastating in practice. They used magnetic fields to accelerate metal slugs to incredible speeds. The projectiles had no guidance systems, no fancy technology. They were just chunks of dense metal moving very, very fast. The first railgun shot hit the Kethmoran cruiser, exactly in the center of its hull. The crystal structure that could bend energy beams and absorb laser fire shattered like glass when struck by a solid object moving at 30,000 miles per second. The alien ship broke apart in a flash of brilliant light. On the Kethmaran flagship, alarms began sounding throughout the bridge. Zexthul stared at his tactical display as one of his ships simply disappeared from the screen. "Report," he demanded. "The humans used some kind of projectile weapon, Commander. The cruiser's shard of victory has been destroyed." Zexthul felt something he had not experienced in 2 centuries of warfare. Fear. Not fear of death, but fear of the unknown. How had a primitive, projectile weapon punched through shields and armor that could stop the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy? "All ships, evasive maneuvers. Do not let the humans target you." But the human captain was not finished. Jake ordered his ship to turn toward another group of alien vessels. The Valiant was not fast compared to the crystal ships, but it was maneuverable. And Jake had an idea. "Amy, fire everything we have at that formation of 3 ships." The Valiant's railguns fired again, joined by a spread of missiles. The aliens tried to dodge, but their ships were designed for elegant space combat, not violent maneuvering. 2 more Kethmaran vessels exploded as railgun slugs tore through their hulls. The missiles were a different problem. The alien point. Defense systems tried to shoot them down, but human missiles were designed to be hard to hit. They used random course changes and electronic jamming to avoid defensive fire. 3 missiles got through and detonated against the 3rd alien ship's hull. Unlike the railgun impacts, the explosions did not destroy the ship immediately, but they cracked the crystal structure and caused power failures throughout the vessel. The alien ship began drifting, its weapons offline and its engines dead. "Commander," the Kethmoran weapons officer reported with a trembling voice, "we have lost 3 ships. The humans are using weapons we do not understand." Zexthul looked at the tactical display. In less than 5 minutes of combat, he had lost more ships than in the previous 10 years of conquest. The human vessel was still surrounded, still outnumbered, but it was fighting like nothing he had ever encountered. "How are they doing this?" he asked aloud. His science officer spoke up hesitantly. "Commander, our weapons are designed to fight energy-based defenses. All the species we have conquered used shields and armor that worked by deflecting or absorbing energy. But the humans are using kinetic weapons, physical projectiles. Our defenses were never designed to stop solid objects moving at such speeds." Zexthul realized with growing horror that his empire's greatest strength had become a weakness. Bandiar, Kethmoran had become so advanced, so sophisticated in their warfare, that they had forgotten how to fight against simple, brutal weapons. On the Valiant, Jake was beginning to understand something important. The aliens fought like a machine, precise, calculated, following established patterns. But humans fought like humans, chaotic, unpredictable, willing to try anything that might work. "Amy, what's our ammunition status?" "Railgun rounds at 70%, missiles at 60%. "And the enemy?" "They're pulling back, trying to stay out of our weapons range. I think we scared them." Jake looked at the tactical display. The alien ships that had been closing in were now keeping their distance. For the first time since the battle started, he allowed himself to hope that they might actually survive this. "Ben, send a message to the alien commander." "Ready, Captain." "Tell him that humans don't surrender, and if he wants to leave our system, now would be a good time." Zexthul received the message and felt his certainty crumble. For 300 years, the Kethmoran Empire had been unstoppable. But now, for the first time, they had met a species that could fight back and win. Commander Zexthul stood silent on his bridge, staring at the tactical display where 3 of his ships had been just minutes before. Empty space now marked where the cruisers had died under human weapons. His officers waited for orders, but for the first time in his long career, Zexthul was not sure what to do. The human ship continued to sit in the center of his formation, its weapons pointed in different directions. It was like a cornered animal showing its teeth, daring the hunters to come closer. But Zexthul was beginning to think that the humans were not the prey in this hunt. "Commander," his weapons officer spoke carefully, "should we continue the attack?" Zexthul considered his options. He still had 64 ships against 1 human vessel. By any reasonable calculation, he should win this battle easily. But reasonable calculations had not accounted for weapons that ignored his defenses and tactics that made no sense. "Change our attack pattern," he decided. "Concentrate all fire on one section of their hull. Overwhelm their ability to absorb our energy." On the USS Valiant, Captain Jake Morrison was thinking about the next move. The aliens had pulled back, but they were regrouping. He could see on his tactical display that they were forming a new attack formation. "Amy," he called to his tactical officer, "what are they doing now?" Lieutenant Amy Carson studied her sensors. "Looks like they're going to focus all their firepower on our port side. Smart move. Even our armor can't absorb unlimited energy." Jake nodded. The aliens were learning. That was not good news for his ship. "How much time do the transports need?" 4 hours and 53 minutes. Still almost 5 hours to go." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was calm and focused, but he could see the tension in their faces. They all knew they were fighting impossible odds. "Lisa," he called to his chief engineer over the comm, "can our armor handle concentrated fire?" In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lisa Grant was already working on that problem. "I'm redirecting power flow through the hull plating. If they hit us in one spot, I can channel the energy to other sections. But Captain, if they keep shooting the same place for more than a minute, we're going to have problems." "Understood. Do what you can." The second alien attack came like a focused storm. Instead of shooting from all directions, the Kethmoran ships had moved to one side and were pouring all their energy into a small section of the Valiant's hull. The ship shook violently as beam after beam struck the same area. Hull temperature rising fast in Section 7, Amy reported, her voice tight with concentration. Armor is absorbing what it can, but it's reaching saturation point. Jake made another decision that defied military logic. Instead of trying to turn away from the concentrated fire, he turned toward it. Amy, all weapons on the ships directly in front of us. Ben, warn the crew we're going to ram. Lieutenant Ben Harper's eyes went wide. Ram, sir? You heard me. If they want to sit still and shoot at us, let's see how they like it when we shoot back at close range. The Valiant accelerated directly toward the alien formation. Jake was gambling that the Kethmoran ships would scatter rather than face a collision. But some of the alien captains were too slow to react. The human ship's railguns fired at point-blank range, sending metal slugs through two alien vessels before they could move. The crystal hulls exploded in showers of sparkling fragments. But Jake was not finished. Brace for impact. The Valiant's reinforced bow struck a third Kethmoran ship just behind its bridge section. The alien vessel's elegant design was not built to withstand a ramming attack. The crystal structure cracked and shattered as the human ship drove through it like a battering ram. On the bridge of the Valiant, sparks flew from overloaded systems and the lights flickered. Jake felt blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead, but his ship was still moving, still fighting. Damage report. Amy's console was smoking, but she was still at her post. Forward shields are down. Hull breach in sections 3 and 4, but emergency bulkheads are holding. We're venting atmosphere, but life support is stable. What about the aliens? 3 more ships destroyed, the rest are scattering. In the engine room, Lisa was working frantically to keep the ship's systems running. The ramming attack had damaged several power conduits, and she could smell burning metal in the air. But the ship's reactor was still stable, and the engines were still responding. Captain, she reported over the comm, we've lost about 20% of our power distribution network. I can keep us running, but we can't take another hit like that. Jake understood. His ship was tough, but it was not invincible. The ramming attack had worked, but it had cost them. He needed a new strategy. On the Kethmoran flagship, Commander Zexthul was trying to understand what had just happened. The human ship had deliberately crashed into one of his vessels. It was a tactic so primitive, so brutal, that his tactical computers had not even considered it as a possibility. Commander, his aide spoke in a shaking voice. We have lost 6 ships. The human vessel is still operational. 6 ships. Zexthul had lost more vessels in this one battle than in the conquest of entire star systems, and the humans were fighting with just 1 ship. What is their condition? Damaged, but still combat effective. Their weapons are still online. Zexthul looked at the tactical display. His remaining ships were spread out now, no longer in perfect formation. Some of his captains were asking for permission to retreat to a safe distance. Others wanted to concentrate their fire and destroy the human ship regardless of the cost. For the first time in his career, Zexthul was facing a decision that could determine the future of the Kethmoran Empire. If word spread that a single human ship had fought his entire fleet to a standstill, other species might start to think that the Empire could be resisted. All ships, he broadcast. Maximum power to weapons. Destroy that vessel at any cost. The third wave of attacks was different from the first 2. The Kethmoran ships no longer tried to capture the human vessel intact. They poured everything they had into destroying it. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and particle weapons all converged on the Valiant. The human ship's armor glowed white-hot under the assault. In the engine room, Lisa watched her displays as power levels fluctuated wildly. The armor was absorbing enormous amounts of energy, but it was reaching its limits. Captain, we can't take much more of this. The armor plating is starting to melt. On the bridge, Amy was calling out damage reports as fast as she could read them. Shields down to 30%, multiple hull breaches, weapon systems operating at reduced capacity. Jake knew his ship was dying, but he also knew that every minute they held out was another minute for the civilian transports to escape. He had one more trick to try. Amy, do we have any nuclear warheads left? 2, sir, but our missile tubes are damaged. Can we launch them manually? Amy thought for a moment. We could vent them through the cargo bay. No guidance systems, but if we get close enough. Jake smiled grimly. Do it. Ben, I need you to send a message to the alien fleet. Ready, Captain. Tell them that humans have a saying. If you want to dance, you better be ready to pay the band. The message confused the Kethmoran translation computers, but Commander Zexthul understood the tone. The humans were not finished fighting. The USS Valiant turned toward the densest concentration of alien ships. Its engines were damaged, and its hull was glowing from absorbed energy, but it was still moving. In the cargo bay, the crew was manually loading 2 nuclear warheads into the launch tube. Warheads ready, Amy reported. Take us in. The Valiant accelerated toward the alien formation one more time. The Kethmoran ships tried to scatter, but Jake had anticipated their movement. At the last second, he ordered the warheads launched. The nuclear explosions lit up space like 2 new stars. The electromagnetic pulse from the detonations knocked out several alien ship systems. But more importantly, the explosions created a gap in the enemy formation. Amy, all remaining weapons, through that gap, everything we have. The Valiant's damaged railguns fired their last rounds through the opening created by the nuclear blasts. 3 more Kethmoran ships died as metal slugs punched through their hulls. Commander Zexthul watched 9 of his ships disappear from the tactical display. In one battle, he had lost more vessels than some entire campaigns, and the human ship was still fighting. For the first time in 300 years of conquest, a Kethmoran commander began to consider the possibility of defeat. The space around Haven Prime was filled with debris and the fading glow of nuclear fire. Commander Zexthul stared at his tactical display, watching the icons of his ships flicker and disappear. 9 vessels destroyed by a single human ship. It was impossible, yet it had happened. The human vessel was still there, still fighting. Its hull was scarred and glowing with heat, pieces of metal floating away from damaged sections. But its weapons were still active, and it showed no signs of surrendering. Commander, his tactical officer reported with barely controlled fear. In his voice, the remaining ships are requesting new orders. Some captains are asking permission to withdraw to a safe distance. Zexthul felt anger rise in his chest. Withdraw? Retreat? These words did not exist in the Kethmoran military vocabulary. His empire had conquered worlds for 3 centuries, without ever retreating from a battle. Send a message to all ship commanders, he ordered. Any captain who retreats without permission will be executed for cowardice. We will destroy this human ship. But even as he spoke the words, Zexthul was beginning to understand that this battle was different from anything in Kethmoran history. The humans fought with a brutality and unpredictability that his people had never encountered. On the bridge of the USS Valiant, Captain Jake Morrison was assessing his situation. It was not good. His ship had taken massive damage, and his ammunition was running low. But he was still alive, and the alien fleet was clearly shaken. Amy, he called to his tactical officer. What's our status? Lieutenant Amy Carson looked up from her damaged console. A cut on her cheek was bleeding, but her voice was steady. Railgun ammunition down to 30%. No more nuclear warheads. Missiles at 20%. But Captain, our sensors are picking up something interesting. What? The alien ships are not coordinating their attacks anymore. They're operating independently. I think we broke their command structure. Jake studied the tactical display. Amy was right. The alien fleet was no longer moving in perfect formation. Some ships were advancing, others were holding back, and a few were actually moving away from the battle area. They're confused, he realized. They don't know how to fight an enemy that won't follow the rules. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lisa Grant was performing miracles to keep the ship running. Half of her power distribution network was gone, and 3 of her main conduits were melted slag. But the reactor was still stable, and she had managed to reroute power to the essential systems, Captain, she reported over the comm. I can give you maybe 2 more hours of combat operations. After that, we're going to start losing life support. 2 hours. Jake looked at his chronometer. The civilian transports needed 3 more hours to finish evacuating Haven Prime. He had to find a way to buy them more time. Ben, he called to his communications officer. Are you picking up any chatter from the alien fleet? Lieutenant Ben Harper was working with a partially functioning console, but his translation computers were still online. Yes, sir. They're arguing among themselves. Some ships want to continue the attack. Others want to fall back and wait for reinforcements. Jake felt a spark of an idea. If the aliens were arguing, maybe he could use that against them. Send a message to the alien fleet. General broadcast. Ready, Captain. Tell them that Earth. Command has dispatched a full battle fleet to this system. They'll be here in 2 hours. If the aliens want to face 50 human warships, they're welcome to stay. It was a complete lie. Earth had no battle fleet, and no reinforcements were coming. But Jake was betting that the aliens were rattled enough to believe it. On the Kethmoran flagship, the translation of the human message caused immediate debate among the command staff. 50 human warships? If one human ship could destroy 9 Kethmoran vessels, what could 50 do? Commander, his science officer spoke hesitantly. Is it possible the humans have a larger fleet? Zexthul did not know. His intelligence reports on humanity were limited and apparently incomplete. If the humans had been hiding their true military strength, this battle could be a trap. How long would it take for human reinforcements to arrive from their nearest base? Unknown, Commander. We do not have accurate data on human faster-than-light travel capabilities. The uncertainty was worse than enemy fire. Zexthul was used to fighting battles where he knew exactly what his opponents could do. But the humans kept surprising him. Back on the Valiant, Jake was preparing for what might be his final move. His ship was dying slowly, bleeding atmosphere and power. But he still had one advantage. The aliens thought like soldiers, while he thought like a human. Amy, I need you to target their command ship, the big one in the center of their formation. Sir, that ship is 3 times our size. Our remaining weapons might not be able to penetrate its armor. We're not going to shoot it, Jake said with a grim smile. We're going to ram it. The bridge fell silent. Even his experienced crew was shocked by the idea of ramming a ship that size. Captain, Amy said carefully, a collision with that vessel would destroy us completely. Maybe, but it would also take out their command ship. And judging by how confused they are already, losing their commander might make the rest of the fleet scatter. In the engine room, Lisa heard the plan over the comm and immediately started working on a new problem. If they were going to ram the alien flagship, she needed to squeeze every bit of speed out of the damaged engines. Captain, I can give you full power for about 10 minutes. After that, the reactor containment might fail. That's all we need. The cow. USS Valiant turned toward the Kethmoran flagship and began to accelerate. The alien ship was massive, its crystal hull reflecting the light from nearby explosions in brilliant patterns. It was beautiful, like a work of art floating in space. Commander, Zexthul saw the human ship approaching and realized what they intended to do. All weapons target that vessel. Destroy it before it reaches us. Energy beams converged on the Valiant from every direction. The human ship's armor glowed white-hot as it absorbed the incoming fire. Pieces of hull plating broke away and spun into space. But the ship kept coming. On the Valiant's bridge, console after console exploded in showers of sparks. The main screen flickered and went dark. Jake could hear the metal hull groaning under the stress of the energy bombardment. Amy, can you still target their engines? Yes, sir, but we only have a few shots left. Wait until we're close. Make them count. The distance between the two ships closed rapidly. The Kethmoran flagship was trying to turn away, but it was too large and too slow. Jake could see details on its hull now. Weapon ports, sensor arrays, docking bays. Fire! The Valiant's last railgun round struck the alien flagship's engine section. The crystal structure cracked and split, venting atmosphere and energy. The massive ship began to lose power and drift, but Jake was not finished. The collision was only seconds away. All hands, brace for impact. At the last moment, something unexpected happened. Instead of trying to ram the alien flagship directly, Jake ordered his engines to full reverse. The Valiant scraped along the side of the larger ship, its damaged hull tearing open the alien vessel's armor like a can opener. The two ships separated in a shower of debris and escaping atmosphere. The Catamaran flagship was crippled, its command center exposed to space. But the USS Valiant was still intact, still fighting. Commander Zexthul found himself looking up at stars through a hole in his bridge ceiling. Half of his command staff was dead or injured. His ship was powerless and drifting, but more importantly, his fleet was in chaos. Without his command signals, the other Catamaran ships were operating on their own. Some were still attacking the human vessel. Others were trying to rescue survivors from the flagship. A few were actually retreating from the battle area. On the Valiant, Jake was bleeding from several cuts and his right arm was broken. But he was still conscious, and his ship was still responding to commands. "Damage report," he called out weakly. Amy's voice came from somewhere in the smoke-filled bridge. "We're in bad shape, Captain, but we're alive. And sir, the alien fleet is breaking up. They're not attacking in formation anymore." Jake looked at his chronometer. 2 hours and 15 minutes since the battle started. Less than 3 hours, until the transports were clear. Ben, send another message to the alien fleet. "Systems are down, Captain." Then use the emergency transmitter. "Tell them they have one chance to leave this system alive. Take it." The message went out on all frequencies, bouncing off the debris field and reaching every ship in the alien fleet. On vessels throughout the Catamaran formation, captains and commanders looked at the tactical situation and began to understand that their empire's reputation for invincibility had just been shattered by a single human warship. For the first time in 300 years, Catamaran ships began to retreat from a battle. The silence in space was broken only by the crackling of damaged communication systems and the hiss of escaping atmosphere from crippled ships. Commander Zexthul floated in the emergency command center of his flagship, watching through a cracked viewport as his fleet struggled to maintain formation. 11 ships destroyed, his own vessel crippled. And the human ship was still there, still defiant, its weapons still tracking his remaining vessels. In 300 years of conquest, no Catamaran commander had ever faced such a disaster. "Sir," his aide spoke through a damaged helmet communicator. "Captain Veltar of the cruiser Silver Wind is requesting permission to continue the attack." Zexthul looked at his tactical display. The human ship was clearly damaged, venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches. Its energy signature was weak and fluctuating. By all logical analysis, one more coordinated attack should finish it. But logic had failed him today. Everything he thought he knew about warfare had been proven wrong by a single human vessel and its impossible crew. "Sir?" his aide prompted. On the bridge of the USS Valiant, Captain Jake Morrison was fighting to stay conscious. His broken arm was secured in a makeshift sling, and a medic had bandaged the worst of his cuts. Around him, his crew worked at damaged stations, keeping their dying ship operational through pure determination. "Time check," he called out weakly. Lieutenant Amy Carson looked up from her sparking console. 2 hours and 47 minutes. "Since the battle started, Captain. Transports need 43 more minutes to clear the planet. Less than an hour to go." Jake tried to assess his ship's condition. The Valiant was barely holding together. Life support was failing in 3 sections. The weapons were down to emergency reserves, and they were facing 56 alien ships that could destroy them with one coordinated attack. But something had changed in the enemy fleet. Jake could see it on his tactical display. The alien ships were no longer moving in perfect formation. Some were advancing cautiously, others were holding back. A few were actually moving away from the battle area. "Ben," he called to his communications officer, "what are you hearing from the alien fleet?" Lieutenant Ben Harper was working with a half-melted console, but his translation programs were still functioning. "Lots of chatter, Captain. They're arguing about whether to continue the attack. Some ship captains are questioning their orders." "Questioning? Orders?" Amy looked surprised. "That doesn't sound like military discipline." Jake managed a weak smile. "Maybe that's the point. We've been thinking of them as this perfect military machine. But they're individuals, just like us. And individuals can have doubts. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lisa Grant was performing the mechanical equivalent of surgery, keeping her reactor stable with spare parts and determination. She had rerouted power through backup systems that were never designed to handle the load. Her engine room looked like a battlefield, but her reactor was still producing power. "Captain," she reported over the comm, "I can give you maybe 30 more minutes before we start losing critical systems. The containment field is holding, but barely." 30 minutes. Jake looked at his chronometer again. It would be close, but they might actually make it. "Amy, what's the status on the alien fleet?" "They're confused, sir. I'm seeing ships breaking formation. Some are pulling back to long range, others are moving toward us, but not in any coordinated pattern." Jake realized something important. The aliens had never fought an enemy that could hurt them badly. They had no experience with taking heavy casualties or seeing their command structure disrupted. They were psychologically unprepared for a real war. "Ben, send a message to all alien ships, general broadcast." "Ready, Captain." "Tell them this. You came here expecting an easy conquest. You found a fight instead. You can keep fighting and lose more ships, or you can leave now and tell your empire that humanity is not to be underestimated. Your choice." The message spread through the Kethmaran fleet like a virus. On ship after ship, commanders and captains read the translation and felt something they had never experienced before. Uncertainty. Captain Veltar of the Silver Wind had served in the Kethmoran fleet for 60 years. He had participated in the conquest of 17 worlds. He had never seen his own forces take casualties like this. "Communications officer," he ordered, "connect me to the fleet commander." But there was no response from the flagship. "Commander, Zexthol's ship was drifting powerless, its command center exposed to space. The fleet was effectively leaderless." "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving requests for orders from multiple ships. What should I tell them?" Veltar looked at his tactical display. 1 human ship against 56 Kethmaran vessels. The odds were still overwhelmingly in their favor. But 11 of his fellow captains were dead, their ships reduced to floating debris. For the first time in his career, Captain Veltar began to wonder if some battles were not worth winning. On the Valiant, Jake was using his ship's sensors to monitor the alien fleet's behavior. What he saw gave him hope. The alien ships were no longer acting as a unified force. They were individual vessels with individual commanders, each making their own decisions. "Amy, I need you to target the ship that looks most ready to attack. Not to shoot, just to target. The cruiser approaching from our starboard side? That one. Lock weapons on it." Amy's hands moved over her controls. "Locked on, Captain." "Ben, send a direct message to that ship. Tell the captain that we have him targeted, and if he fires on us, he'll be the first to die." The message reached the Silver Wind within seconds. Captain Veltar read the translation and felt his certainty crumble. The humans were not bluffing. They had already proven they could destroy Kethmaran ships with primitive weapons. "Helm," he ordered quietly. "Reduce speed. Maintain current distance." Across the fleet, other captains were making similar decisions. Without clear orders from a fleet commander, without a proven strategy for fighting humans, they were choosing caution over aggression. Commander Zexthul finally managed to establish communication with his remaining ships. His voice came through. "Damaged transmitters, weak but clear. All vessels, this is Fleet Command. Continue the attack, destroy the human ship." But his orders were met with silence. Then one by one his captains began to respond. "Sir, this is Captain Mordan of the Deep Strike. My ship has taken damage from debris, requesting permission to withdraw for repairs." "Fleet Command, this is Captain Yexnall of the Starpiercer. We are detecting possible human reinforcements on long-range sensors. Recommend tactical withdrawal." "Sir, Captain Thuvan of the Crystal Blade. My crew is reporting system malfunctions, unable to continue combat operations." Zexthul listened to excuse after excuse from his commanders. They were not malfunctions or damage reports, they were fear. His captains were afraid of a single human ship. On the Valiant, Jake was watching the alien fleet with growing amazement. The ships were not retreating exactly, but they were not attacking either. They were just waiting. "Captain," Amy reported, "I'm reading increased energy signatures from several alien ships. They might be preparing to jump to hyperspace." "Are they leaving?" "Some of them, yes, sir. 3 ships just disappeared from our sensors." Jake felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The alien fleet was breaking up. Individual ships were deciding that this battle was not worth continuing. Time check? 18 minutes until the transports are clear. 18 minutes. They had actually done it. A single human destroyer had held off an entire alien fleet long enough for the civilians to escape. "Ben, send one more message to the remaining alien ships." "Ready, Captain." "Tell them that the evacuation transports will be clear in 18 minutes. After that, we're leaving too. They can have this empty system if they want it. But the people are going with us." The message reached Commander Zexthul as he was trying to regain control of his fleet. The humans were offering him a way out. He could claim that he had driven them from the system while avoiding further losses. But Zexthul knew the truth. He had been defeated by a single enemy ship. His reputation was destroyed, his fleet was scattered. And worse, word of this battle would spread throughout the galaxy. "Sir," his aide spoke carefully. "Your orders?" Zexthul looked at the tactical display one more time. The human ship was barely functional, its hull scarred and bleeding atmosphere. He could probably destroy it with one more coordinated attack. But what would be the cost? How many more ships would he lose? And what would happen when other species learned that humans could be beaten, but only at terrible cost? "Signal the fleet," he ordered finally. "All ships withdraw to hyperspace jump distance. We will observe the human evacuation from long range." It was not a retreat. It was a tactical withdrawal. At least that was what he would put in his report to the High Command. On the Valiant, Jake watched the alien ships pull back to a safe distance. They were not leaving the system, but they were no longer threatening the planet. "Captain," Amy reported with relief in her voice, "the last transport just cleared the planet's atmosphere. All civilians are safe." Jake closed his eyes and let out a long breath. They had done the impossible. A single human warship had faced down an entire alien fleet and won. "Ben, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them that Haven Prime has been successfully evacuated. The Keth Moran Fleet HFY